It was the perfect setup. A battlefield far from the palace. A loyal soldier unknowingly carrying his own death warrant. And a king righteous, respected, revered, watching from the shadows. Uriah's death looked like an unfortunate casualty of war, but this wasn't war. It was murder. And the man behind it wore a crown. But before we go further, please kindly ensure you subscribe to this channel and like this video. A city crowned in golden light, steeped in ancient law and divine purpose. King David ruled from a palace built high on Mount Zion, just below the temple he longed to build. He was beloved. A shepherd turned king, a warrior turned psalmist. To the people he was the chosen one. But behind the stone walls of the palace, something darker stirred. Uriah the Hittite was no ordinary soldier. Though not born an Israelite, he was among David's elite mighty men, loyal to the end, unshakably brave. At his side stood Bathsheba, a woman of beauty and quiet strength. Together they lived modestly, bonded by love, faith, and duty. Uriah was at war, defending the kingdom David ruled. But David stayed home. It began with a glance. One late afternoon, King David strolled the palace rooftop. Below him, in the privacy of her courtyard, Bathsheba bathed, unaware of the eyes above. David looked. Then he lingered. What followed was swift and secretive. He summoned her to the palace. Their meeting was brief. What happened that night would soon spiral into a scandal of biblical proportions. Weeks later, Bathsheba sent word. She was pregnant. David panicked. If word got out, his integrity, his crown, would be questioned. So he moved to cover the affair with what seemed like a clever plan. He recalled Uriah from the front lines. Pretending it was a favor, David welcomed the soldier with wine and flattery. "Go home," he said. "Rest. Be with your wife." But Uriah refused. He wouldn't enjoy comfort while his comrades fought and bled. David tried again, this time with more wine. Still, Uriah slept at the palace gate. The king's desperation deepened. And then, the fatal decision. David wrote a sealed letter to his general Joab. In it, he ordered Joab to send Uriah to the fiercest part of the battle and then withdraw support. The letter, carried by Uriah himself, would become his own execution note. A few days later, the news returned. Uriah was dead. At first, there were no suspicions. On the surface, Uriah's death seemed tragic but plausible. He'd died honorably, another soldier fallen in a brutal war. But General Joab, hardened by battles and seasoned in palace politics, knew better. The orders were unusual, the positioning reckless. Joab followed through, but not without raising an internal alarm. There were whispers among the ranks. Why Uriah? Why was he moved to such a vulnerable spot? And why, after his death, did the king immediately take Bathsheba as his wife? Yet no one dared speak openly. David was not just king, he was God's anointed. Accusing him was dangerous. That is, until a prophet walked in. David had long been known for his heart, his songs, his humility, his justice. But now, guilt haunted him like a shadow. Psalm 32, later written by David, hints at his agony. "When I kept silent, my bones wasted away. Day and night your hand was heavy on me." David was crumbling inside, but outwardly he carried on. Bathsheba, newly married and mourning, said nothing. Perhaps fear held her tongue. Perhaps grief silenced her. Joab kept his thoughts hidden behind battlefield scars. He followed orders, but his conscience burned. The people saw only fragments. A hero fallen. A king's kindness to a widow. Few knew the truth. Fewer dared to ask. Until Nathan arrived. Nathan didn't accuse David directly. Instead, he told him a story. A rich man with flocks and herds stole a poor man's only lamb, not out of need but out of greed. David burned with anger. That man deserves to die. Then came 4 words that shattered the silence. "You are the man." It was a moment of divine confrontation. Nathan exposed the sin with chilling precision. David had taken what wasn't his, then covered it up with blood. There were no denials, no excuses. David said, "I have sinned against the Lord." But justice had already begun its course. David's life didn't end, but it unraveled. The child born from the affair died. His family fractured. Violence erupted among his sons. The sword never left his house as Nathan had warned. David's soul, though, was marked by repentance. He wrote Psalm 51, a raw, broken confession that echoes through time. "Create in me a clean heart, O God. Restore to me the joy of your salvation." Bathsheba later gave birth to Solomon, a king of peace, born from pain. But Uriah, faithful, honorable, unsuspecting, remains one of the Bible's quiet martyrs. A man erased not by war but by the will of a king. Sometimes the greatest crimes aren't committed in back alleys or under darkness, but in palaces, behind crowns, under the weight of unchecked power. David's story isn't just about failure, it's about the cost of secrets and the burden of guilt. In the end, truth didn't come through soldiers or courts, it came through a prophet with the courage to say, "You are the man."